The ancient archive station hung in orbit around the dying red dwarf, its crystalline structure catching the faint crimson light. Archaeologist Zixtat's heart raced beneath his iridescent scales as his six-fingered hand activated the forgotten console. He had spent 15 cycles searching for this place, following fragmentary references in the oldest Concordiate records. Now, alone in the silent chamber, he would either validate his controversial theories or confirm his status as the laughingstock of the Academy of Sinohistory. The holographic display sputtered to life, ancient glyphs swirling before resolving into legible script. Zixtat's breath caught in his secondary respiratory chamber. Terminal accessed. Historical archive. Pre-Concordiate era. Warning. Contains restricted information on Class X species designation. Human. His translator implant struggled with the unfamiliar designation, but Zixtat recognized it immediately. Humans. The mythological warriors from children's cautionary tales. The bogeymen that parents across 30 species use to frighten younglings into proper behavior. Asterisk be harmonious in all things, or the humans will return asterisk. The text scrolled before him, describing beings of such contradictory nature that his scientific mind struggled to accept their existence. These humans, supposedly adapted to environmental changes within mere generations, rather than the thousands of cycles other species required. They possessed remarkable endurance, continuing to function despite injuries that would incapacitate any known Concordiate species. Most disturbing were the detailed accounts of their capacity for both boundless compassion and terrifying warfare, concepts so diametrically opposed that no rational species could embody both. Impossible, Zixtat whispered, even as he recorded everything. No evolutionary path could produce such cognitive dissonance in a functional species. Yet the evidence mounted as he accessed deeper archives. Anatomical studies, behavioral analyses, genetic sequences unlike anything in modern databases. Most compelling were the fragmentary visual records, bipedal beings of varying colors and sizes, some with reflective protective coverings that the text identified as armor. Zixtat lost track of time, absorbing information that contradicted everything the Concordiate understood about sentient evolution. The peaceful alliance of 30 species had existed for 12,000 cycles, its founding principle being that advanced intelligence naturally evolved beyond conflict. Yet these records suggested that humans had achieved remarkable technological advancement while maintaining aggressive instincts. 3 days later, he stood before the Academy's Sinohistorical Review Board, his scales dull from exhaustion. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice steady despite the skeptical gazes fixed upon him. "I have discovered definitive evidence that humans were not mythological constructs, but a historical species that interacted with our early ancestors." The chamber erupted in dismissive chirps and resonant hoots, the Concordiate species equivalent of derisive laughter. "These humans are clearly allegorical warnings against unchecked aggression," countered Professor Valnier, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns indicating severe disapproval. "Every developing civilization creates mythological monsters representing behaviors they wish to overcome. Your evidence merely confirms the universality of this psychological mechanism." Zixtat activated his presentation, displaying the recovered genetic sequences. "Allegories don't have DNA, Professor. These beings existed." "Existed perhaps, but certainly extinct," interjected another academic. "No species combining such contradictory traits could achieve long-term stability." As the debate intensified, Zixtat noticed a silver-furred figure watching from the rear of the chamber. Admiral Krina of the Border Fleet, her expression unreadable but intensely focused. When the session ended in predictable rejection of his findings, she approached him in the corridor. "Your research interests me, archaeologist," she said quietly, her claws rhythmically tapping against her ceremonial rank insignia. "I've seen anomalies at the edge of the void, sensor readings that match no known species, disturbances that disappear before we can investigate." Before Zixtat could respond, Every communication device in the Academy simultaneously activated with the same emergency alert. At the very edge of Concordiate space, monitoring stations were detecting massive energy signatures emerging from the void. Signatures that matched no known species but aligned perfectly with the theoretical human ships described in his ancient texts. The legend was becoming reality. The Concordiate observation post Harmony 7 floated silently at the edge of known space, its crystalline architecture designed to blend with the cosmic background radiation. 6 different species worked in perfect coordination aboard the station, their movements a dance of efficiency refined over thousands of cycles of peaceful cooperation. Senior observer Pelitho adjusted the sensitivity of the quantum resonance array, his tentacles moving with deliberate precision. Strange fluctuations in subspace, he noted to his colleague. Pattern matches nothing in our databases. Before his colleague could respond, space itself seemed to tear open 2 million kilometers from their position. The fabric of reality rippled and distorted as though wounded, spilling forth vessels of a design so alien that the observers initially struggled to recognize them as artificial constructs. Unlike the organic curves and harmonious geometries of Concordiate ships, these were angular, asymmetrical, and bristling with protruding structures that disrupted space in ways the observers' instruments could barely measure. The vessels moved with unsettling purpose, their formation suggesting not just intelligence but strategy, a concept largely academic to the Concordiate species. By the first harmony, whispered Pelitho as the station's automatic identification systems failed to classify the approaching fleet. Alert Central Command immediately. Within 6 hours, Admiral Krina's diplomatic vessel, the Concordant Dialogue, approached the anomaly zone. Its hull gleamed with iridescent peace symbols recognizable to all known spacefaring species. In the command center, Krina studied the magnified images of the unknown vessels with growing unease. Their design prioritizes function over form, she observed. Note the reinforced bow sections and the layered hull architecture. These are vessels built to endure damage. Beside her, archaeologist Zixtat frantically attempted to establish communication patterns based on his fragmentary knowledge of human language, recovered from the ancient archives. The linguistic structures are agglutinative with positional syntax, he muttered, similar to theoretical reconstructions of pre-Concordiate communication systems. The silence stretched for excruciating minutes. The unknown fleet maintained position, neither advancing nor retreating. Sensors detected intense energy emissions and internal movement within the vessels, but no attempt at communication. "They're scanning us," reported the sensor officer, her crystalline form vibrating with anxiety. Energy patterns consistent with deep structural analysis. "They're seeing through our hull." Krina's fur bristled along her spine. "Continue broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. Archaeologist, any progress?" Zixtat adjusted another parameter. "I believe I've identified basic mathematical constructs in their transmission protocols. If I can establish—" "Admiral," interrupted the tactical officer. "A smaller craft has launched from the lead vessel. Acceleration suggests intercept trajectory." On the main viewer, a sleek, dark craft separated from the massive lid ship, its propulsion leaving distortion patterns unlike anything in Concordiate records. It approached with precision that spoke of advanced navigation systems, decelerating at the last moment to match velocity with the Concordant Dialogue at a distance of 1,000 kilometers, close enough to signal intention for contact while maintaining defensive positioning. The communication, when it finally came, arrived simultaneously across all Concordiate frequencies, suggesting an effortless breaking of their encryption protocols. The message was jarringly direct, lacking the formal courtesies and harmonic modulations that characterized all civilized communication in known space. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Federation ship Prometheus. We've been running for 13 years. The swarm follows closely behind us. You have approximately 72 hours before they arrive. Will you stand with us, or will you fall as dozens of civilizations before you have?" The translator rendered this in the gentle, indirect language of the Concordiate, but even through translation, the blunt urgency sent ripples of panic through Krina's crew. Zixtat stared at the view screen in stunned recognition. "The legends were real," he whispered. "These aren't the mythical humans of ancient warning fables. There's something far more complex." Krina squared her shoulders and signaled for a channel to be opened. Her response would shape the future of the Concordiat itself. "Captain Vasquez of Earth," she began carefully, "we welcome peaceful contact. Please clarify the nature of this swarm and the assistance you require." The response came instantly, accompanied by a data packet that overwhelmed their systems with its size and complexity. "The swarm doesn't negotiate, it consumes. We'll show you. Permission to come aboard." Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the UEF Prometheus, her weathered face illuminated by the unfamiliar stars of Concordiat space. 27 years of command had etched permanent lines around her eyes and mouth, yet her posture remained unwavering. Behind her stretched humanity's final hope, minus 3,721 vessels carrying 57 million souls, all that remained of a civilization that once spanned hundreds of worlds across dozens of star systems. "Status report on the trailing scouts," she ordered without turning. Lieutenant Commander Chen consulted his neural interface. "Last transmission received 40 minutes ago. Swarm Vanguard elements have accelerated, Captain. Their projected arrival has been revised to 63 hours. Elena nodded, unsurprised. The swarm always moved faster than predicted. It was part of their nature. Adapt, accelerate, consume. For nearly a century, humanity had been fighting, evolving, and retreating in a desperate race to stay one step ahead of extinction. And our new friends. Their diplomatic vessel has extended docking privileges. Their communication patterns suggest extreme caution bordering on panic. Understandable, Elena said, finally turning from the viewport. They've lived without existential threats for so long they've forgotten what fear feels like. They're about to remember. The Concordiat delegation boarded the Prometheus amid a protocol that baffled them. Armed guards flanking every corridor, security scans at each intersection, and crew members who never fully turned their backs on the visitors. To the Concordiat species, these behaviors indicated deep-seated aggression. To the humans, it was simply survival. Admiral Krina maintained diplomatic composure, despite her obvious shock at seeing the mythical humans in the flesh. Her silver fur trembled slightly as she extended formal greetings, but her voice remained steady. Beside her, archaeologist Zixtat could barely contain his excitement, his scaled skin shifting through colors that reflected his emotional state. What surprised the delegation most was the diversity of the human crew, varying in size, coloration, and physical characteristics far more than any Concordiat species. You evolved on one planet? Zixtat asked incredulously as they toured the ship. Impossible. Your phenotypic variation suggests at least 7 homeworlds. Elena's laugh was harsh but not unkind. Earth. One planet with hundreds of ecosystems. That adaptability is why we've survived this long. The swarm consumed our sector systematically over 3 generations. We've been fighting, adapting, and retreating for nearly a century. She led them to the tactical center, where holographic displays showed the approaching swarm, a vast cloud of biomechanical vessels driven by a single consuming purpose. The Concordiat delegates watched in growing horror as Elena's officers explained the swarm's behavior patterns and evolution. They learned from each encounter, explained Strategic Officer Mbiki, his fingers manipulating the display to show battle footage from previous engagements. Each defeat teaches them. Each victory feeds them. They incorporate the biological and technological distinctiveness of whatever they consume. How do you fight such an enemy? Admiral Krina asked, her military training, largely theoretical in the peaceful Concordiat, struggling to comprehend the scale of the threat. Before Elena could answer, her tactical officer interrupted with grim news. Captain, long-range scouts confirm the swarm has altered course. They're no longer following our planned trajectory. They're heading directly for the core worlds of the Concordiat. They've sensed fresh hunting grounds. The delegation's translator couldn't fully capture the nuances of the humans' expressions, but even the peaceful Concordiate species recognized the gravity in Alina's eyes as she turned to them. "This is no longer about offering us sanctuary," she said quietly. "Your entire civilization is now on the swarm's menu. You have two choices: fight alongside us with every resource you possess, or become another extinct species in their wake." Admiral Kreena's fur flattened against her body, a sign of deep resolve in her species. "We must inform the Concordiate Council immediately." "Do that," Alina agreed, turning back to the tactical display. "But understand something crucial, Admiral. The Concordiate has lived in peace so long you've forgotten a fundamental truth. Sometimes survival requires becoming what you fear." She gestured toward the vast human armada visible through the viewport. "We became monsters to fight monsters. The question is whether your people can do the same in time." The Grand Council chamber of the Concordiate spanned an artificial planetoid, its architecture designed to accommodate 30 different species in their native environments. Tiered observation platforms surrounded a central speaking area, each section maintaining carefully calibrated atmospheric bubbles. The chamber had hosted 12,000 cycles of peaceful deliberation, but never a crisis of this magnitude. The human delegation stood in the center, conspicuously armed despite formal requests to disarm, a concession reluctantly granted by the council due to the humans' insistence that they were always in danger. Captain Alina Vasquez, flanked by her senior officers, looked diminutive compared to many of the counselors. Yet her presence dominated the chamber. "These humans bring war to our doorstep," bellowed Counselor Drath, his methane-breathing apparatus bubbling with agitation. The massive gas giant native's translated voice reverberated through the chamber. "Their very existence violates our founding principles of harmony." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly until Zixtat stepped forward, his scales now a formal academic blue. "Esteemed Council, I present new evidence discovered in our most restricted archives." Holographic displays activated around the chamber. "These ancient texts suggest humans were once our allies, before the Great Forgetting. They didn't bring the swarm. They've been fighting it to protect us, without our knowledge, for thousands of years." High Counselor Thrix, her luminescent tendrils pulsing with concern, leaned forward. "Archaeologist, even if your interpretation is correct, that would mean these humans abandoned us to fight alone. Or were driven back," countered Admiral Kreena. "The archives suggest a devastating conflict that nearly destroyed both our ancestors and humanity. What if the Concordiate's founding principle of pacifism arose not from evolutionary superiority, but from the luxury of being protected by humans at the edge of the void?" The chamber erupted in debate. Throughout it all, Alina stood immobile, her patience visibly thinning as precious hours slipped away. Finally, she stepped forward, the chamber's translation systems struggling to convey the steel in her voice. "While you debate ancient history, the swarm approaches. We fought them across hundreds of systems. You have days, perhaps hours." Her neural implant interfaced with the Council's presentation system, displaying technical scans of Concordiate defense systems. "My engineers have analyzed your capabilities. You might as well be protected by pretty lights and good intentions." Outrage cascaded through the chamber until Admiral Kreena's commanding presence cut through the chaos. "I've witnessed human technology firsthand," she announced. "Their targeting systems tracked and neutralized a micrometeoroid at 50,000 kilometers, technology we considered theoretically impossible. Their medical sciences regenerate injuries that would be fatal to our species." The debate might have continued for hours, following the Concordiate's traditional consensus-building protocols, but fate intervened. A junior communications officer rushed into the chamber, scales pale with fear. She whispered urgently to the High Counselor, whose tendrils stiffened in alarm. "Multiple Concordiate outposts have gone silent," Fricks announced, her voice hollow. "Not damaged, completely gone. The outer defensive grid is registering massive approaching biomass larger than anything in our records. Alina met the High Counselor's gaze directly. You have no weapons, no warriors, no concept of defense. We offer our protection in exchange for sanctuary. Decide now. The council chamber fell silent, ancient protocols of deliberation shattered by the immediacy of the threat. High Counselor Thrix rose to her full height, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to the formal configuration indicating an emergency directive. Captain Vasquez, the Concordiat accepts your offer. What do you require? Alina's response was immediate and precise. Everything. Your shipyards, your energy production facilities, your communication networks, and most importantly, your people's willingness to learn what you've spent millennia forgetting, how to fight. As the council hastily approved the unprecedented alliance, Zixtat approached Alina with a data crystal. Captain, I found something in the ancient archives you need to see. Coordinates for a facility hidden at the center of Concordiat space. A facility built by humans 12,000 cycles ago. For the first time since her arrival, surprise registered on Alina's face. You're saying we've been here before? That we fought the swarm here? Not just fought, Zixtat replied, his voice low. The records suggest you nearly won, until something went catastrophically wrong. The massive habitat ring of New Alexandria, once dedicated to cultural exchange and artistic pursuits, transformed into humanity's base of operations overnight. Where meditation gardens had flourished, tactical planning centers now hummed with activity. Recreation spheres became training grounds. Symphony halls housed strategic command posts. Human engineers worked alongside bewildered Concordiat technicians, retrofitting pleasure craft with hastily manufactured weapon systems. The peaceful species watched in fascination and horror as humans demonstrated combat techniques that had never been needed in 12,000 cycles of Concordiat peace. Your crystalline communication systems are actually perfect for weapons targeting, explained Lieutenant Commander Reyes as he reconfigured a Phosian art installation into a defense grid. His hands moved with practiced efficiency across control surfaces never designed for warfare. You've been using military-grade technology for light shows. With minor modifications, this network can track and target swarm bioships across an entire star system. The Phosian artist whose creation was being transformed vibrated with distress, her crystalline structure emitting discordant tones. This was meant to harmonize emotional resonances between species, not destroy life. Rice paused, his expression softening momentarily. I understand. But sometimes preserving life requires the willingness to take it. He gestured toward a viewport where the human Armada hung in space. Every ship out there was something else once. Passenger liners, science vessels, colony transports. We converted them because the alternative was extinction. Admiral Crene observed human training methods with growing appreciation as they worked with Concordiat volunteers. They accomplish in days what would take us cycles, she told Zixtat as they watched a human instructor teaching a group of Vixilians how to operate a targeting system. Their biology seems optimized for crisis. They process stress in ways our species cannot. Not optimized, Zixtat corrected. Conditioned through evolutionary pressure. The ancient texts suggest their homeworld was unusually hostile by our standards. Extreme temperature variations, high gravity, dangerous predators, frequent natural disasters. They evolved expecting threat as the default condition, while we evolved expecting harmony, Krina mused. I'm beginning to understand why our ancestors might have chosen to forget them. Their existence challenged our most fundamental assumptions about sentient development. In a cavernous chamber filled with ancient artifacts beneath the council headquarters, Captain Alina Vasquez stood beside Zixtat as they examined what the archaeologist had discovered. The chamber contained technology, clearly human in origin, control interfaces with human-proportioned access points, written instructions in Proto-English, and designed aesthetics matching the oldest human vessels. These match our oldest technological records, Alina said, running her fingers over symbols identical to those on her own ship. The ones preceding the long night, when we lost most of our history. Her expression tightened. We've been in a cycle of retreat and rebuilding for far longer than we realized. Zixtat activated a holographic display showing galactic positioning data. According to these records, your ancestors helped establish the Concordiate, then created a defensive perimeter around it. The ancient texts weren't warnings against humanity. They were warnings by humans about the swarm. We were guardians, Alina whispered, not monsters. Their revelation was interrupted when the station shuddered violently. Warning systems activated throughout the habitat ring as Admiral Krina's voice echoed through communication channels. All personnel to emergency stations. Swarm Scout Force detected. They bypassed our outer detection grid using some kind of spatial manipulation technology. Around them, Concordiate species froze in panic, their societies having no cultural framework for responding to direct threat. In stark contrast, human personnel moved with immediate purpose, racing toward the danger rather than away from it. Alina's command neural link activated, flooding her consciousness with tactical data. We estimated 60 hours, she said grimly. They gave us 16. The main swarm fleet can't be far behind. As the habitat ring shuddered again, a sound unheard in Concordiate space for 12 millennia echoed through the corridors. Weapons fire. The peace of the Concordiate had ended. Its trial by fire had begun. The combined fleet launched its first coordinated defensive action against the swarm's advanced scouts. Human warships formed the offensive line while Concordiate vessels, hastily retrofitted with human weapons technology, provided support from the periphery. The swarm's biological ships moved in patterns reminiscent of insect swarms, sacrificing dozens of smaller units to overwhelm single targets. From the command deck of the Prometheus, Captain Alina Vasquez directed the battle with the calm precision of a veteran commander. Cruiser Group 7, pivot to Sector 4. Concordiate sensor array ships, maintain distance, and continue feeding targeting data. No unnecessary heroics from our allies. They're not ready. Admiral Krina stood beside her, watching in stunned silence as human vessels executed maneuvers that violated several principles of what the Concordiate had considered immutable spatial physics. They moved with an intuitive understanding of combat that no simulation could have prepared her for. How did your pilots learn to fly like that? She asked as a human corvette spun on its axis to deliver a precision strike against a swarm node ship. They didn't learn, Alina replied without taking her eyes from the tactical display. They were born for it. Most of our pilots are third-generation combat specialists, genetically enhanced for spatial awareness, neural processing speed, and stress adaptation. Krina's fur rippled in shock. You modified your own species. We evolved, Alina corrected. Artificially, yes, but guided by the same principle that drives all evolution. Survival. A Vixilian observation vessel commanded by one of Zixtat's former academic rivals, Professor Valnir, maintained position at the battle's edge, capturing unprecedented data. When a swarm command node was disabled but not destroyed by concentrated fire, human boarding teams secured it before it could self-destruct. A suicidal action that astonished the Concordiate observers. They willingly risked 27 lives to capture that node. Valnir reported to the Council, her crystalline form pulsing with scientific excitement. And 16 of them survived. Their damage tolerance exceeds anything in our medical database. The captured node revealed intelligence that changed everything. In a secure chamber aboard the Prometheus, Alina, Krina, and Zixtat reviewed the extracted data. The swarm was engineered, Zixtat translated, his scales pale with shock. Created as a weapon by a precursor species designated the Architects to cleanse the galaxy of competing intelligent life. Their creators are gone, Alina added grimly, consumed by their own creation. But the swarm continues its programmed purpose. It's not malevolent. It's algorithmic. It cannot stop until all potential competitors are eliminated. Most chilling was the discovery that the swarm had been systematically herding humanity toward the Concordiate for generations, not pursuing them, but driving them like predators toward vulnerable prey. They recognized us as the only legitimate threat, Elena said. So they've been pushing us toward you. The perfect bait. A thriving civilization with no defenses. But why not simply destroy both our civilizations separately? Krina asked. Resource efficiency, Elena replied. The swarm is intelligent in its way. By forcing us together, they can eliminate 2 threats in a single campaign. After hours of analysis, Elena's tactical team proposed a desperate plan. Tracing the swarm's communication network back to its central node and delivering a targeted strike using technology reverse-engineered from the ancient human artifacts discovered beneath the Council headquarters. When she presented the plan to the Council, High Counselor Thrix's luminescent tendrils pulsed with distress. You would knowingly send ships to die, risk lives deliberately, to save trillions. Without hesitation, Elena responded, her voice steady. It's what humans have always done. It's why we survived when others fell. The council chamber fell silent as the full implications set in. The legends hadn't exaggerated human capacity for both sacrifice and violence. They had understated it. Zixtat stepped forward, his academic reserve finally shattered by urgency. The historical evidence suggests this is not the first time humans have made this choice, to sacrifice themselves for the Concordiate. 12,000 cycles ago, they nearly succeeded in destroying the swarm. We must give them the chance to finish what their ancestors began. While the Concordiate Council debated Elena's plan, long-range sensors detected a separate swarm force bypassing their defensive perimeter. The trajectory analysis sent ripples of horror through Concordiate tacticians. The swarm was heading directly for the nursery worlds, a cluster of carefully terraformed planets where the young of multiple species developed in carefully maintained environments. They're targeting our future, Admiral Krina said, her voice hollow as she reviewed the data. Without those worlds, 17 Concordiate species face extinction within a generation. Elena's response was immediate. Prometheus to all human vessels. Battle Group Aegis, form up. We intercept at the nursery cluster. She turned to Krina. We'll divert to protect your children. The council can debate strategy after they still have a future to plan for. The human armada split, with Elena leading a third of their remaining ships toward the nursery worlds without waiting for Concordiate approval. The tactical parameters were grim. They would be outnumbered 4-1, with no chance of reinforcement and minimal Concordiate support. Admiral Krina made an unprecedented decision, broadcasting on all Concordiate frequencies. All vessels with operational engines, regardless of function, follow the human fleet. This is not a request. This is the future of our civilization. The battle for the nursery worlds became a desperate last stand as human ships formed a defensive sphere around the vulnerable planets. Across the battlefield, acts of extraordinary heroism unfolded alongside incomprehensible horror. A human mining vessel, the Carpathia, deliberately collapsed a spatial corridor by detonating its drive core, trapping a swarm harvester force at the cost of all hands. On the surface of Nursery World Helix 3, human ground teams evacuated Concordiate young while fighting off swarm infiltrators. Commander Sarah Chen, bleeding from multiple wounds, held the last evacuation point single-handedly for 17 minutes while carrying 2 Phosian infants whose crystalline forms would have shattered at the slightest impact. From the Concordiate Command Center, Zixtat and Admiral Krina watched as humans demonstrated the full spectrum of their capabilities, the very qualities that had made them legendary. Their violence was terrifying yet precisely controlled, their sacrifice never wasteful, but calculated for maximum effect. They fight differently when protecting others, Krina observed, more intensely than when defending themselves. According to the ancient texts, humans evolved as pack predators, Zixtat replied. Their social structures prioritize the protection of the young, not just their own, but any they consider under their care. The lone human pilot, Lieutenant Amara Okafor, deliberately flew her damaged fighter directly into a swarm queen ship when her weapon systems failed, detonating her reactor to save a fleeing convoy of Concordiate nursery ships. Her last transmitted words became an immediate legend among the watching Concordiate species. "The children get to live. Worth it." When the battle ended 30 hours later, the nursery worlds were secure, but at devastating cost to the human fleet. Of the 412 human vessels that had diverted to protect the Concordiate's most vulnerable worlds, only 89 remained operational. As Concordiate medical teams tended to injured humans, they discovered something unexpected. Humans healed at rates that seemed impossible. Their bodies adapted to recover from trauma that would be fatal to any Concordiate species. Evolution through conflict, Zixtat whispered, watching a severely wounded human soldier insist on returning to duty despite injuries that should have been debilitating. The very concept our ancestors found so abhorrent is what might save us all. The Concordiate Council unanimously approved Alina's plan, finally understanding that humanity's warrior nature existed not because they loved violence, but because they loved so fiercely what they protected. The humans weren't monsters. They were guardians who had shouldered the burden of necessary violence so others could live in peace. As preparations for the final assault began, High Counselor Thrix approached Alina with the Concordiate's highest honor, a crystal containing the harmonized life songs of all 30 species. "We misjudged you," Thrix admitted. "We thought your kind were dangers to be feared. Now we understand. You are the wall against which the darkness breaks." The combined human Concordiate Armada approached the massive spatial anomaly identified as the swarm's central nexus. Thousands of ships moved in perfect coordination, Concordiate vessels using their superior sensor technology to map the swarm's defenses, human warships positioned to deliver the killing blow. At the center of the formation, the retrofitted Concordiate science vessel Eternal Harmony carried the weapon they had constructed, a fusion of ancient human technology recovered from Concordiate archives with the crystalline resonance capabilities unique to Phosian engineering. Captain Alina Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, now scarred from multiple battles. "All ships, maintain formation. We'll have one shot at this. Remember the simulator runs. The swarm will sacrifice half its units to prevent us reaching the Nexus." What no one anticipated was the swarm's response. As if recognizing the existential threat, it abandoned all other hunting grounds and converged on the attacking fleet with its entire collective biomass. The scale was beyond anything even the humans had encountered, millions of bioships forming attack patterns of impossible complexity. The battle transcended conventional warfare, becoming a struggle for the future of all sapient life. Human ships dove into the heart of swarm formations on missions with minimal survival chances. Concordiate vessels, guided by human tactical advisors, executed maneuvers their designers never imagined possible. Species that had known only peace for millennia discovered their capacity for controlled violence when protecting what they loved. On the Eternal Harmony, Zixtat worked frantically alongside human engineers, making final adjustments to the weapon. "The resonance frequency is destabilizing," he reported. "The power requirements exceed our calculations." Admiral Krina's voice came through the comm system. "We're losing our escort vessels. The swarm is adapting to our attack patterns faster than predicted." Alina's flagship, the Prometheus, suffered catastrophic damage while leading the final assault on the swarm nexus. Massive sections of hull were torn away as the ship placed itself between the swarm and the vulnerable Eternal Harmony. "Prometheus is compromised," Alina reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Engineering deck breached. Reactor containment failing. We can maintain position for 3 minutes, no more." Admiral Krina, against all Concordiate protocols, took personal command of a rescue mission. "Hold position, Captain. We're coming for you." As Krina's ship docked with the crippled Prometheus, Alina transferred command of the final assault to her executive officer and joined the Admiral in delivering the payload to the Eternal Harmony. Together, they fought through the last swarm defensive line, Two leaders from worlds apart united by a single purpose. At the heart of the swarm nexus, they discovered not a mindless biological computer as expected, but a twisted, tortured intelligence, the last remnant of the species that created the swarm, preserved and enslaved by their own creation. The being was ancient beyond comprehension, its consciousness split across millions of swarm vessels. We sought perfection. It communicated directly into their minds. We created it, and it consumed us. With seconds remaining before the swarm's defenses overwhelmed them, Alina and Krina activated the device. The crystalline components resonated with increasing intensity, amplifying the frequency patterns recovered from the ancient human facility. "This ends now," Alina said, her hand steady on the activation control. "For both our peoples. For the future." The device detonated in a cascade of energy that rippled outward through subspace. Throughout Concordiat space and beyond, the swarm vessels simultaneously lost cohesion, becoming inert biomatter drifting in space. In the aftermath, the Concordiat formally invited humanity to join their alliance. The ceremony took place in the newly reconstructed council chamber, where a monument now stood bearing the names of every human ship lost in the defense of the Concordiat. Zixtat completed his definitive historical work, titled Guardians of the Void: The Human Legacy. The final chapter described how the humans, once thought to be merely cautionary legends, had become integral to a new Concordiat, one that balanced peace with preparedness, compassion with strength. On the observation deck of New Alexandria, Admiral Krina stood beside Captain Alina, watching human children play alongside young Concordiat species. "They will never know war as we did," Alina said quietly. "Because of your sacrifice," Krina replied. "You were never the monsters of our legends. You were their heroes."